Hi, friends. Let's make sure that we are activating the core correctly in our movement practices. So you'll need a block for this little experiential part. So when we activate our core, which is a cue I give probably a dozen times during any of my classes here, activate your core. Okay, this is what I want to make sure we're doing. We'll start with the pelvic floor, the floor of the core. So your pelvic floor is made up of a web of muscles, right? Lots of different little muscles there at the very base of your pelvis. And then, of course, woven within those muscles are the bodily openings that we have. And so each of those openings also has a little sphincter muscle around it. So we want to tone that area for, first of all, it's the foundation for good posture and for protection of our internal organs and to keep those internal organs and fluids in versus leaking out or prolapsing out, and for stability and protection of the low back, the hips. So it's really good to make sure every now and then and go back and revisit the pelvic floor and the deep core. So, in order to practice um, becoming aware of and toning that pelvic floor, let's lay back and put a block underneath our hips. We'll just sit on that block. This is so that gravity will help to teach us. It will make it easier to become aware of what it feels like when the pelvic floor is engaged versus relaxed. So we start with what I call it's waking up the pelvic floor. And so we want to engage each one of the sphincter muscles of each bodily opening there. We'll start at the back and then work our way forward here. So without using your glutes or your thigh muscles here, just think of squeezing off that anal muscle, right? Like you're trying to avoid passing some gas. And then think of pulling that whole area towards the crown of your head. And then relax. And do that one more time, right? Just isolating that anal muscle and then releasing. And then if you have a vaginal canal, I want you to close off that muscle. Think of lifting towards the crown of the head and then relaxing. One more time. Just that little sphincter muscle and lifting towards the crown and relaxing. And then finally closing off the urethra like you're trying to avoid leaking any urine. And then relax. One more time. To relax. And of course, you can hit pause and practice this as long as needed, but I want you to feel each different area. That's just a way of waking up the awareness and the muscle tone throughout your pelvic floor. Once you have felt that, then we'll find the what I call the bullseye point to focus on when lifting the pelvic floor. Okay, so just to reinforce, we're not using our glutes or our inner thighs or any other muscles. We're still isolating that pelvic floor. But visualize that space that is in back of your genitals, but in front of your anus. That is the spot that we think of now activating that area of musculature and drawing it up towards the crown of your head. And then relax. Let's do this with the breath a few times. We'll actually activate the pelvic floor as we begin our exhale. and then release it on the inhale. That's the easiest way to learn. Do that a couple more times, just thinking of where that area would be. And of course, you're in your own home. You can actually find that area if you want to feel around, and you can just kind of press on that area of muscle. Maybe one more time here. So, all right. Now we'll lift the hips, come off of our block or our support, and let's come to seated, or you could come to standing if you prefer. But now gravity will no longer be helping us. Gravity will be pulling us down. So have a seat or standing somewhere that where you can actually, let's do this seated so that you can have your pelvic floor touching something, touching a cushion of some sort. And I want you to get the flesh of your bottom out from behind you so that you are sitting not on your sit bones, not on those two little nubby bones at the base of the pelvis, but you're sitting slightly in front of that. That means you're sitting right on the pelvic floor. So let's try that again. Once more, isolating each sphincter muscle. So your choice, which direction you want to go. But we'll inhale, prepare, and then exhale, lifting one sphincter. And then we'll relax. As you begin the next exhale, lift another sphincter. And then relax. Once again, lift the final sphincter. Do your exhale. And then relax. Now, how did that feel compared to when you were doing it when gravity was helping your pelvic floor lift? Right. So might need a little more practice in an upright position. And then when you are ready to move on, then we hone in on that little bullseye point, that space behind the genitals in front of the anus. Inhale, and then lift that bullseye point. Exhale. And then we'll stay here holding, not holding the breath, holding the activation as we breathe. So practice that just a little bit, keeping the pelvic floor lifted, but the glutes relaxed and the breath still flowing. Because there will be times when we want to keep that pelvic floor engaged. All right, now relax. And I'm going to add another piece. So in addition to lifting through the pelvic floor, we want to have the sides of our low core also engaged. And so the transverse muscle is the muscle that kind of wraps around your hips and your waist, like a girdle, like a corset. And so a lot of times there will be a cue, we'll draw navel to spine. I want to get away from that navel to spine because that's actually up a little higher than what we want to draw in. And if you draw in navel to spine, and that's all you draw navel to spine, and then you do something that requires movement, or you do a sit up, or you do an action, what you're actually doing is like if you think of squeezing a balloon, if you squeeze the middle of it with and not squeeze the bottom, that there's pressure on the bottom of the balloon and it like whoop, flops out, right? So think if you just draw navel to spine, yeah, you're activating all those upper abdominal muscles, but you're also creating more pressure on your pelvic floor, which would certainly aggravate if you have any muscles that or any organs that are prolapsing, or you tend to have any issues with any type of leakage from that area. So we always lift the pelvic floor first and then draw the belly into the spine. Okay, so let's get back to it. This is how I like to teach this. Put your your thumb, on your navel, your palm on your low belly. So it's where your palm is that we want to draw in, which is actually about 2 inches below the navel. This is the very center, the very pit of your belly. So to practice this, Inhale, prepare. As we think of exhaling, we're going to lift the pelvic floor and then draw that low belly, that palm area, in towards your spine. Stay here with this engagement, but continue to breathe. Gee, did you notice that you all of a sudden maybe sat up a little taller without having to even put any effort into your posture? That's another benefit from it, besides keeping everything in place in your pelvis, and besides protecting your low back and SI joints and the whole pelvic area. All right, let's do that one more time. We'll release the hands, just let them come to your knees. But think of that as you begin your exhale, lifting the pelvic floor, draw the low belly into the spine, and then breathe from this foundation of stability. So that, my friends, is activating your core. Now, if you want to play with this a little more, let's take a few little movements. So this will help with balancing, just with moving forward and with twisting. So let's come to a kneeling position here. So you could also do this standing and go into a standing lunge, but for the camera position, I'm going to stay kneeling. So whether you're kneeling or standing, let's activate the core. Okay? Pelvic floor, low belly in. From that stability of the core, notice how it feels to just move your foot forward or pick up a leg and set it forward. Oh, gee, was that a little smoother? Maybe not quite as wobbly because you had this stability. Same thing stepping out of a pose or coming back to kneeling. It's much easier if your core is activated. Say we are on all fours. Same thing, you can activate your core. So pelvic floor and then navel into, oh, I almost caught myself saying navel to spine. See, I'm trying to change my language that I use as well. So pelvic floor lifted, low belly towards spine. That's going to keep my spine neutral and protected. So I'm not overarched and I'm not rounded. And then from there, I would take maybe a spinal balance, lifting one leg and the opposite arm, and reaching through the fingers, reaching through the heel, and feel that sense of balance and stability and strength here. And then, of course, it's easier. We can, even in slow motion, we can come back to that hands and knees position. Not much wobbling at all involved there. And then finally, one other area will be twisting. Let's do a windshield wiper first, and then a more of a seated twist. So I really like this on the windshield wipers. If you lay down on your back, then feet are out wider than the hips. Let your arms be out like a T. Now, many times we'll just let the knees willy-nilly drop to one side and then drop to the other side. And sometimes that can aggravate a low back or your SI joint or your hip, although it feels really nice. So let's try it another way, just so that you have options. Let's activate the core. So our pelvic floor is lifted, low belly is into spine, and then let's create the movement from this spot in the low belly. So if you let your low belly start to, we'll say, lean towards the right, and the legs just are relaxed and follow, but we're keeping that core strong and stable and moving. Ooh, that's actually a deeper windshield wiper, but oh, my back feels very, very supported here. And then when I come out of this twist, I keep the core engaged, or maybe you relax it while you're holding in that. If you pause at that windshield wiper, reactivate your core, pull your low belly back towards center, or I'd say lead with your low belly, not really pull the low belly. And then let your low belly press into the other side of that windshield wiper. Your low belly will bring you back to neutral. So you could do this with your breath, but your low belly is initiating the movement. Exhaling into a windshield wiper. Inhaling to neutral. Exhaling the other direction. Inhaling to neutral. Notice how that feels on your back, your hips. See if that helps feel a little more protected if you do have any issues there. And then for a seated twist, let's just play with this because I'm going to throw just a little bit of a curveball to you. All right, so we're in our seated position. We'll lift the pelvic floor, draw that low belly into the spine, and let's actually put our hand right there, thumb touching the navel. Let's put the other hand on our heart, our rib cage. So this is a really nice, effective, and protective twist that's seated. All right, so let's think of, on the exhale, letting our low belly slightly turn towards the left. It'll be millimeters. You may not even notice it or feel it. And let the rib cage turn towards the right. How does that feel? Just breathe here. Whether you leave your hands right here or then now let them release and you can just touch your knee and touch the floor behind you. Keep that core active. Okay, this twist, it's not as deep as we would go if we were just cranking into the twist. But by doing it this way, we have, instead of twisting at our low back and sacral area, which is a very vulnerable area and is sometimes hyper flexible, now we've moved that twist up. So we're actually giving the abdominal organs a really nice squeeze here. And we're helping to loosen up higher up on the spine that can get kind of stuck versus already being hypermobile and vulnerable like the low back is for a lot of us. Right? And then when we're ready to come out of this, we just unwind, right? We bring the belly back to center, the rib cage back to center. Notice how that feels. And then whenever you are finished practicing, whether it's just a regular practice or just practicing toning the core and the pelvic floor, do take a moment to lay down and relax and release that area. And I always incorporate that in my classes when we are relaxing and I go through the different body parts. I'll say, let go of your hips, let go of your pelvic floor. And that's because we do need to relax that area as well as engaging. If we are always holding tight with the pelvic floor, even when we go to relax the rest of the body, because sometimes that can be a habit too, that has its own set of issues that can develop. So we want to be able to activate it and engage it. We also want to be able to let that area relax. So try these little ideas and see how it affects your movement practice. Thanks for joining me.